Welcome to this session of the Intuitive Medicine Summit, where we'll explore ways to participate in our own healing with my guest, Dr. Judith Orloff. Our topic today is Ignite the Power of Your Intuition. Judith Orloff, MD, is a psychiatrist, an empath, and the New York Times bestselling author of Guide to Intuitive Healing. As an intuitive healer and member of the UCLA Clinical Psychiatric Faculty, Dr. Orloff synthesizes the pearls of traditional wisdom with leading edge knowledge of intuition, energy, and spirituality. Dr. Orloff, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm really glad to be talking to you because I love the fact that you are both an MD and an intuitive. And I'm wondering, how do you use both in your practice of medicine with patients?
It's my great honor to be able to integrate my scientific knowledge and my 14 years of medical training at UCLA, at USC, at the Veterans Administration, all that linear, wonderful training with my intuition. And it's so natural. Intuitive healing is so naturally combined with science. So what I do is that when a patient comes in, and I still see private patients, they come in, they tell me why they're there, and I listen with my linear mind, and they'll say, oh, I have problems with my boyfriend, I'm having problems with my health, I'm feeling depressed, whatever they think they're there for. And I'll listen. And then I'll also be tuning in to any images, impressions, sights, smells, sounds, knowings, body energies, flashes that I pick up as they're talking. So there are two streams of information coming in. One is more linear and one is more intuitive and instinctive. And I combine all of that together to help the person.
Wow. I wish every doctor was able to do that. It would make life so much easier, wouldn't it?
It would. And I'm training healthcare practitioners. I give workshops and trainings for healthcare practitioners. So little by little, more and more people are, opening up to having the skill set to do this. It's a skill set that's learned. Mm-hmm. So it isn't just a supernatural power. It's a skill set that's learned. Though some people might be more talented than others or have an innate talent for it. Some children are just born intuitive. Others have to work a little harder to develop it, but everyone can develop their intuition. If you're listening and you feel really out of touch with your intuition, you can just restart now by just getting quiet, tuning in, and finding that inner voice. Because it doesn't matter how far you've gone from it or how fast your mind is going or how overwhelmed you feel. You can always start again over and over. And I've done that. I do that all the time. If I'm off, if I feel out of touch, I'll stop, hopefully sooner rather than later. I'll stop, start over again to tune in. Always close your eyes, go inward, take a breath, let the mind go by like a ticker tape and refocus on the breath and begin to expand myself beyond my linear mind to something larger. That's the basic intuitive exercise that you must do to shift out of the mind into a more spacious arena where you can hear intuition come in. So it's that conscious shift from small self to large self is an important part of awakening intuition.
Yeah, that makes so much sense nowadays. Now, I'm familiar with your story. Your parents were both doctors, and they were not really very thrilled with you expressing your intuition. How did you get beyond that to feel confident that you were right in following the path that you followed?
In my first book, Second Sight, I write about my personal journey in integrating intuition in medicine. And as a child, I had 25 physicians in my family. Both my parents were physicians. And I grew up all around doctors. That was just my culture that I grew up in. And I was a little girl that was an empath who would sense things, know things, feel energy, often feel overwhelmed by it. I would have dreams. I'm a dream empath. I have dreams that come true. And finally, my mother at age 9 or maybe 10 said to me, never mention another one of your intuitions at home again. So I was forbidden to express it, and that's a horrible, horrible feeling for a child, who has these gifts and who needs to express. It's like a waterfall. It has to keep flowing. It has to keep getting developed and expressing itself, just like a flower growing. But I put a stop to it. And in my early life, I got very heavily involved with drugs to try and squash that part of myself because I did not want to express it. I didn't want to be considered weird. I didn't want my mother to look at me with that horrible, exasperated look like there was something wrong with me. It just was all wrong. So I wanted to run from it. And I did run from it for a little while. And then destiny brought me back, by my parents sent me to this wonderful psychiatrist who was my mentor, throughout my life, from that early point until he passed on. And he helped me see that in order to be whole, I had to integrate my intuitions into my being. There's no way I would be happy or comfortable in my own skin unless I did that. And so when you even have one person who believes in that and who you really resonate with, they can help you. I've been that guide to people. You could find other guides who can be just that person who said, you must, Lisa, you must integrate this part of yourself in order to be whole. And there's no way around it. And it's a beautiful thing. So he was the first person who ever said that. And I go, oh my God, really? As a child, I felt like a weight was lifted because I wanted to be me, but I was so squashed. I was so repressed. I was so careful because I didn't want to rock the boat. I was an only child, so I didn't have brothers or sisters to take the attention away from me. So the attention was on me. And I just didn't want to upset my parents like that. It's just a horrible feeling. But it's very common for intuitive children to go through this. That's why I like telling my story. Because it's our job to really support these beautiful, precious, empath, intuitive beings and help them to embrace their gifts, to develop it as they grow older and go through different phases and use them for the good.
Absolutely. I thank you for sharing that story because first of all, it's a very powerful story, but it's also, I think, really important for people to hear that if you're squashing your abilities, you're really not living up to your full potential. And I don't mean to sound pat about that, but I'm wondering if you had not worked with this wonderful therapist and opened up your abilities, in your experience, what happens to the body when you suppress who you really are, whether it's intuitive or not? How does that create illness?
Well, for me, my body, as an empath, my body is so sensitive and I depend on my body so much for everything in terms of its eyes and its ears. My body is always listening to energy. All right. And I've been that way since I've been a child, for better or for worse. So what happened to me when I was repressing, I got very anxious. I got very self-conscious. I got very uncomfortable. I would have solar plexus issues, as a young, but, I was running and taking drugs. So that self-medicated a lot of it. But you can have, it's like squashing your compassion or squashing your joy. Let's say asking you to go through life without expressing your joy. What effect would that have on you? You could only imagine. It would be, you are multicolored. You have many gifts. You have many forms of expression that are just waiting to come out and to help you nurture your body, help others, help the world. It's just the way we're made. And so you want to do everything possible to encourage all this to come out. You don't want to squash, repress, or go on empathic overload. In the Empath Survival Guide, I give you tools, strategies, how to deal with overload and try to avoid it in terms of setting boundaries, centering yourself, tuning into your intuition, going out in nature, going into baths, into water, quieting oneself down. There's a whole program of what you do to incorporate your intuition, to nurture your intuition. It's like a flower. You want to water it and do the kinds of things that your intuition loves and responds to. But it means you need to take a little bit of responsibility here for doing the watering. If you know, like me, I didn't have anybody. That's not the ideal circumstance, you know. But even if you have one person who says, wow, that's really an interesting dream you shared with me. That's creative. That's fascinating. You know, to get that kind of feedback as opposed to, who do you think you are expressing that? What is that supposed to mean? You know, you can get awfully negative responses, you know, especially, you know, as time back, you know, when I was growing up, you know, people just didn't know what to make of it.
Mhm.
And, you know, my story was a little complicated because my mother turned out to be a psychic, and I came from a whole lineage of psychic healers. My grandmother, my mother, and my grandmother, I found out because I was brought up in California, not Philadelphia, where they were, was a flamboyant psychic who, an herbalist in her neighborhood in Philadelphia. And my mother became very ashamed of that. She was more mainstream. She felt her neighbors laughed at my grandmother. And so my mother had the same abilities, but never told anyone. And she went into the mainstream medical community, not wanting to be considered weird. She wanted to, her biggest desire in life was to fit in.
Mhm.
I've never met a woman with stronger desire to fit in. And I didn't fit in. And so you could see our tension that was developed. She wanted to squish me into fitting in. And I naturally didn't fit in, which is fine, you know, which is great. It's me. I'm the outsider. I'm the one who goes the path less traveled. I've always have been. But she was like, fit in, fit in. I'm like, no. So you can imagine that tension growing up. So on her deathbed, she informed me that I came from a whole lineage of intuitive healers. And she never wanted to tell me that because she didn't want to encourage me to develop my intuition. Bless her heart. I mean, this woman loved me so much. I can't tell you how much she loved me, but she was so bent on me not expressing this until the last moment. And I said, why are you telling me now? And she said, I want to pass the power along to you. I mean, that's really what she said. I'm thinking, you must be kidding. You know, I'm like, after all this time, you know, but anyways, that's my story. That's her story. and, and that's how it was. It is.
That's
And it's all perfect.
that's really an amazing story. She thought she was helping you. She was doing what she thought was the most loving thing a mother can do. But in the meantime, she, you know, bless her heart, put you through hell. But I mean, people who are interested in this kind of thing know that the wounded healer is sometimes the best healer. So I can see how, you know, karmically this actually worked out best for you. But I'm wondering about people who are watching this, who are experiencing similar things, and maybe they don't have the kind of help that you had, or the kind of support system that you ended up finding. How does one open up to one's own intuition, specifically about the body, because we're talking about medical intuition or intuitive medicine here? How can you listen to what your body is telling you without fear of either being wrong or going crazy? Because I know that's a fear that many people have when their intuition starts opening. I'm losing my mind.
Yeah, that's part of the process, you know, dealing with there's a path to go on. And each person's path is a little bit different for intuitive medicine and intuitive healing. But, you know, some very common obstacles are, I'm crazy if I express myself, you know, I'll go crazy or no one will accept me. I'm so weird. You know, and the other is, what if I'm wrong? And guess what? You will be wrong sometimes. So you have to get used to it. It's part of the flow. And the more you develop your intuition, the more you're going to get a real sense of what feels right, what feels off, what to trust, what not to trust. For instance, very highly emotionally charged material, if you're picking it up, is usually not correct versus more neutral witness state observations, those are usually more accurate. So just in general terms, so that's something to look for, because you have to, in the intuitive healing process and awakening intuition, you must identify your emotional triggers so you don't confuse those with intuitions. For instance, do you have a fear of death? Do you have a fear of loss? Fear of being alone? What else is there? Fear of success? Whatever, fear of intimacy, just some common fears. And if you, let's say, write down your top 5 fears, which is what I always suggest to my readers and patients, you have to look at those top 5 fears and go, I'm going to memorize these top 5 fears. I need to know this because these fears can throw off my intuition. If I keep getting a fear that someone's going to leave me, and then I go on to another person, they're going to leave me, they're going to leave me, they're going to leave me, then it behooves you to deal with your fear of abandonment. There's something more going on. So I always look at intuitive healing as an opportunity to heal myself, along with expanding my intuition. They go hand in hand. The best healers I know are all into self-healing. You can't be in this process and be clear and be a clear channel without working on your own material as well. So that's the intuitive healing part for me, you see. But for my patients or my workshop participants, that's one thing I ask them to do, is to notice your emotional triggers so you don't get confused by all this highly charged information that's coming through, which probably isn't accurate. So in the beginning, if you're developing your intuition, look for the neutral information. And again, what I talked about in the beginning of our talk, and how to go from the small mind, which is linear, and it's A plus B equals C, the small mind, or the chatter, the mental chatter, or the mental torture that happens up here. This is the torture chamber, up in the mind. That's where the pain is, everybody. So you don't want to inhabit that mind solely. You want to be able to shift out of the mind into your intuitive/spiritual space, where you can have more breathing room, and you could listen to other signals that can inform your decisions. If you're in a fearful state, you need to breathe, center. I put my hands together like this as part of my taoist practice, which means coming together. Putting the hands together, I sit in front of my sacred space, which is my most revered part of my home, my meditation altar, where I have my candles, my Kuan Yin statue, bowl of fruit in homage to spirit, flowers. I constantly change fresh flowers. It's a very sacred space to me, very, very, very sacred. And I suggest people create these very simple but sacred spaces so they can meditate, tune in, and learn how to shift from the small to the larger connected space. And I put my hands together. I take a few deep breaths. My mind could be going a mile a minute. I just want to tell you that could be fear of this, fear of that. What is this going to happen? And this is blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on, this up here. So I hear all that. My experience is I'm hearing all that. I'm putting my hands together. I'm also hearing the sound of my breath. I'm beginning to feel myself come more into my body using my breath. I'm focusing on my inhalation and exhalation. I'm feeling my body. I'm not in my head. I feel like I'm inhabiting my body. I feel like my chatter is receding simply because I'm not focusing on it. I'm focusing on something else. And I'm getting bigger. I'm getting calmer. Whew. I could relax and tune in. So that's basically what I go through. And I just want to make it real for people. You are going to hear that mind blasting away. And the secret is, for intuitive medicine, is not to try and shut the mind off. That's a big mistake that people make. If you shut the mind off, it's going to get very angry at you. Get louder. You can try it and see what happens. But you don't want to do that. That's not the right approach. The right approach is you just let it go. But you consciously shift states by using your breath, or some people use a mantra, which is a sacred word or phrase that helps you to tune into your center. And you let the mind recede on its own. You don't do anything to try and squash it. All right. It will recede. It's like a channel going into the background as you place your attention on your heart, on your breath, which is a hypnotic incantation, the breath, the inhalation, the exhalation. I could hypnotize you if I keep saying this. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. It's like rocking. And I was like, I could put you to sleep and relax you, and the mind won't know what happened. It'll just go off somewhere, which is what you want it to do, and then you'll be in this quieter space, and you'll be able to feel your body, number one, because if you're in your head up here, you can't feel your body. It's just, you're just living disembodied head here up. That's how a lot of people live,
Right.
and it's a very painful way to live. So you don't want to live that way. You want to use your mind for all that it's worth, all the brilliant, wonderful insights and logic and debating and analyzing and fantastic, but what it can't do is get you out of the prison of the mind when you're in emotional pain. Cannot do that. So you must know the limitations of the mind so that you can learn how to do just a simple activity that my way is to put my hands together, sit at my sacred space, use the breath, let the mind recede, and then, everything opens up. Suddenly, the boundaries are not like closing in on you. Suddenly you're like, wow, all right. Now I can ask an intuitive question. What can I do about the pain in my hip? Let's say you have something very specific. All right, you inwardly ask this question once the mind recedes. You're not asking the question to the mind. Just know that. You're asking it to your intuition, which is in this wide open space. And so suddenly you might get an image of a castor oil compress, or something like that, a flash out of the blue. The castor oil compress, what is that? So you look it up on Google and you see, Edgar Cayce uses these castor oil compresses for pain. Oh, I never thought of that. No, it probably won't work. Oh, maybe I'll try it. So you can talk yourself out of it too. But I advise you, if you get these flashes in this enlarged state that you're in, just give it a try. Your mind's going to give you a hard time sometimes. It's going to have all kinds of reasons why not to follow what your intuition just told you. But if there's anything I've learned over the years is that my intuition is not going to lead me astray. And it might have some ideas I've never thought about, thank God, and I follow it. Just follow it. That's my law of self-preservation.
That makes a lot of sense, and I really appreciate the exercise that you just demonstrated. I can actually feel myself dropping into my physicalness as you were talking. So I'm wondering then, if we're trying to tap into specific symptoms, we don't know what's going on inside here. We don't know what to tell our doctor when we go. Do you recommend that we try to sort of diagnose ourselves, or just feel into messages? How would you recommend we translate what we're feeling into what we need to work with then?
Yes, that's an interesting question. Well, first, it's just obvious. What are you feeling? Do you have a pain in your stomach? Do you have, irritable bowel symptoms? Do you have headaches? Do you have a feeling of low energy? You have to ask yourself, what is my body feeling? And an important question to ask is, how is my energy level? Because your energy level, should be good most of the time. If it's not, if you're tired a lot of the time, then it needs some tweaking. Your energy should be good. Of course, you need rest days, and you need to really practice a lot of self-care, and especially empaths who can't be overstimulated. So if you're overstimulated, your energy is going to go down. So you've got to just not be like neurotic, hyper vigilant, but just very loving with the body and saying, how are you feeling today? And, you might go in, what you tell the doctor. It depends what kind of doctor you go to, of course. But if you go to, let's say, an old school doctor, let's say you need to get a knee replacement, you tell them, my knee isn't working. I have a lot of pain in my knee, and I think it's worn out. And then the doctor will say, okay, let's get an X-ray or an MRI. And you go, okay, because that's the way of traditional medicine. That's how they diagnose. I mean, you might know you need a knee replacement, but they're going to have to do these tests. So, you have them done, and he says, you need a knee replacement. Your intuition told you that before. And so you just go about doing it. You don't talk to these doctors with, oh, my intuition told me this, because the old guys, and I'm really talking about the good old boys, old club, not the functional medicine doctors that are out there that are more hip and informed, but these old guys, they're around, and you have to talk to them in their language. And you just have to realize their limitations. If you need to have a hip replacement or a knee replacement, you go to them because they're the experts. I mean, hopefully, those orthopedic guys will be replaced with more, someone with a wider span of knowledge, but, maybe not. They're pretty tight and rigid, those guys, but, they're good. They're good people. You just have to know their limitations. All right. And so that's how you talk to them. But if you go to a functional medicine doctor who's trained more in energy, who probably knows what an empath is, the ideal, and this is what my doctor is to have both traditional training and functional medicine training so that they can go to both places. Makes sense. Mm-hmm. That's ideal. If you could find somebody like that, you can't, depending on your locale. I'm in Los Angeles, so I have a lot of options, but, depending on where you are and what's available, though you might consider doing Zoom consults with somebody at a distance just to get a second opinion with a functional medicine doctor. So if you're talking to somebody who gets it, you can talk in energetic terms. If not, then you just talk in what needs to be fixed terms. Mm-hmm. Right. And have respect for everyone. I always, that's why I've, knock on wood, had such good luck with my colleagues, throughout all this. It's been like 30 years because I have ultimate respect for everybody. I try to, and that works. I've seen physicians get very oppositional with the mainstream physicians, and they fight and they go at it. And that's never been my way. I come from a Taoist path, and for 30 years, I've been practicing Taoism and Taoist meditation. And the secret is to always harmonize rather than go like this. This is not the answer for what my body needs. Mm-hmm. And in terms of relationships, of course, I'm not always perfect. Nobody is, but that's what I aim for. Is to harmonize with where people are at rather than battering them about changing their views on things. I've never been a batterer. So many people are interested in my work and what I do, thank God. And it's always been so since I started this, that there are plenty of people who are attracted to this. So I don't feel a need to go and convert people.
Well, we're running very low on time, but I want to ask you one important question. I want to ask you, what's the role of things like deja vu and synchronicity in this kind of work?
They're, being in the zone and intuition. I love the deja vu and synchronicity. That's one thing about the pandemic that's been hard on me, because staying inside all the time, I mean, you miss the natural deja vus and synchronicities that happen when you're out, living life and going on your path. And I took a walk the other day, and I just happened to run into these two beautiful women I knew. Our paths crossed naturally. And I love those experiences. But if you're in the house all the time, they're less. And I have an older friend who's in her 90s, and she says, I don't really miss going out that much. And she's not mobile. So we have a different perspective. I'm very mobile. And so I miss all that. I miss the flow of life, the energy flow of life that happens, the deja vu when you meet someone and you feel like you've known them before. like a soul friend, Anamkara. Or if you go to a place and you think, did I have a dream about this? This seems awfully familiar, and I know I haven't been there. I love things like that. You see, that's part of being in the zone and the intuitive path, and why to do intuitive healing and awaken your intuition over and over and over again. Awakening isn't just the first time. It's every time, every day, 100 times a day. It's not anything that stops. So it's not just like you awaken it, you're there. It's not like that. It's awakening upon awakening. And that's how I want to live. And that's why I love teaching intuition and love teaching and awakening empaths, because this is just, for me, the values that are inherent in this, in terms of listening to the body, honoring the body, setting limits and boundaries, taking care of your energy, opening to spirit, these values are so meaningful to me. They really, really work in my life. Not to say I don't go through hard times at times, and, up and down like everybody, but these are the values that have stood with me, these intuitive medicine values, in terms of living life, in terms of treating patients. And I think they're very worthwhile if you resonate with any of these, to start the practice in your life. And, it brings a freshness to every day, no matter what age, no matter what phase you're in. It's just a beautiful way to be and live the healing way of, as a physician, I could manifest this with my patients and workshop participants. And as a woman, I manifested in my life, and in the joy of spontaneity and letting life teach me each day.
Yeah. Thank you for adding that. I think that was a really important dimension to express. Now, before we go, I want to make sure that I mention your website. That is drjudithorloff.com. And I want to thank you so much for being with us today. I know you're really busy. I'm so grateful that you were able to squeeze us into your schedule. Before we go, is there anything that we've left out that you want to make sure that we bring up?
There's always something that we left out. That's what's so beautiful about life. But I just want to say, everyone listening, for those of you who have doubts about this, but maybe 10% of you wants to do it, I really encourage you, 10%, to go ahead and really deal with the negative voices that come from parents or teachers that said you can't do this, or you're weird. Don't let that stop you, because you deserve the kind of passion that I'm talking about. And those kind of early voices can really get in your way. So you need to identify them and say, they are not true, not true. It is a beautiful thing to develop your intuition. It will only enhance your connection to your health, your spirit, your emotions, your empath self, the spirit. It will only help. It won't make things worse. It will only make things better. So.
All right. Wow. Well, thank you for those beautiful final words. It was, I can just feel your vibe from here. You're just so soothing. Thank you again for being with us, Dr. Orloff. It's been a delight talking with you.
You're very welcome.
All right. I want to remind everyone, I've been talking with Dr. Judith Orloff, and I want to thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this conversation in the Intuitive Medicine Summit.